General Sickles had been fretting over his assigned position all morning on Day 2. By late morning, the last of Buford's 2 brigades of cavalry were leaving the area. With the cavalry gone, there would be virtually no Union units to Sickles' front and left. There was an urgent need for a reconnaissance of Pitzer Woods on Seminary Ridge to the west, and Colonel Hiram Berdan got the order to take his demi-brigade of sharpshooters and infantry there to reconnoiter. The stage was set for a brisk and brief, yet significant firefight in those woods. The video is extracted from over 40 hours of animation, covering the entire Gettysburg battlefield on July 1st and 2nd. For more information about this acclaimed work, visit the website referenced above. Early in the morning of Day 2, Berdan deployed 3 companies of sharpshooters near the Peter Rogers House, where they could work with the 4th Maine in 63rd Pennsylvania. The remainder of the 1st U.S. Sharpshooter Regiment remained in their bivouac position with the rest of Ward's brigade. After a few hours of sporadic mutual skirmish fire across the Henry Spangler farm fields west of the Emmitsburg Road, the situation intensified with the arrival of Anderson's division of Hill's Corps. They deployed along the ridgeline where the present-day West Confederate Avenue runs, with the southern end of their position in Spangler Woods. By late morning, the Union skirmishers reported a sizable enemy force had formed in Spangler Woods, adding to the thin skirmish line of Scales's brigade, now commanded by Colonel William Lawrence, who had opposed the Federals all morning. Harry Fonts, in his book Gettysburg the Second Day, writes, quote, Colonel Elijah Walker of the 4th Maine told his superiors that Spangler Woods in his front held a sizable enemy force. It was suggested that the 4th drive them out, but their force was deemed too small for the job, unquote. Not yet realizing the size of the force in the woods, it was agreed that the woods could be cleared best by a push from the flank rather than head-on. In his official report, Berdan wrote, quote, At about 11 a.m. I received an order to send another detachment of 100 sharpshooters further to the left of our lines and to take the 3rd Maine as support, unquote. Their goal was to probe Pitzer Woods, south of and to the right of the reported Confederate force in Spangler Woods along the ridge line. Lieutenant Colonel Trepp, following Berdan's aide, led 4 companies, D, E, F, and I, out the Trossel Farm Lane to the Emmitsburg Road, where they turned south. Joined along the way by the 3rd Maine, who had earlier in the morning been sent by Birney to the Peach Orchard area to support Union skirmishers, they now were in full view of the Confederates on the ridge to their right rear. Inexplicably, Berdan halted the column on the Emmitsburg Road, as did the 3rd Maine. Trepp angrily reported, quote, This detachment might have been marched from the original position to a point where the engagement took place in perfect concealment and without loss of time, unquote. He further elaborated, quote, All this time we were marching and halting in plain view of the enemy. For this violation of rules of secret expeditions we paid dearly, for when we entered the woods, advancing as skirmishers, we met the enemy's skirmishers very soon after crossing the Fairfield Road, unquote. But while this may have been Trepp's perspective, from the viewpoint of the rebels, this was not quite the case. When Wilcox arrived at the southern and far right end of the Confederate line, he was ordered to align his right regiments, the 10th and 11th Alabama, in the low ground behind the end of Spangler Woods, facing south toward the position they were to occupy. In short, these 2 regiments were already in position, faced in the direction by which Berdan's demi-brigade would advance, well before Berdan started his grand parade down the Emmitsburg Road. The fact that Wilcox would normally order a skirmish line out in front of the 10th and 11th implies that the Confederate skirmishers probably went only a bit further south in reacting to Berdan's bravado. 2 companies of the 6th New York Cavalry were delayed from departing the southern sector of the battlefield with the rest of Devon's brigade because they were engaged with the very same Confederate skirmishers that Berdan would encounter. This fact adds further support to the premise that the Confederates would have been in position to immediately engage Berdan, regardless of whether his advance was in secret or not. So the stage was set. Berdan's 1st U.S. Sharpshooter companies, along with the 3rd Maine, were moving directly toward the 10th and 11th Alabama on Wilcox's right flank. They were briefly supported by elements of the 6th New York Cavalry on the left. From the numerous reports and accounts, history shows that the forthcoming encounter was by chance. In Wilcox's report, describing the situation after he refused the right of his brigade to face south, he writes, quote, "Not knowing whether the woods against which the right of my line rested was occupied by the enemy, the 10th Alabama was ordered to occupy the woods, and the 11th Alabama formed in a line in an open field to the left of the 10th. The regiments, being preceded by skirmishers, were ordered to advance." Unquote. They were headed straight for Berdan. He reported that he could see 3 columns of infantry. They were the 11th Alabama, closest and in the field to his right, the 10th Alabama in the woods to the right rear of the 11th, and the 8th Alabama 400 yards to the rear, near the base of the slope at the southern edge of Spangler Woods from which the other 2 regiments had come. Because they were in an open field, the 11th Alabama advanced more easily and quicker than the 10th and pulled ahead. It began to wheel left, presenting its right flank to that portion of the woods that would be occupied by the 10th. But the 10th Alabama was not yet there. Berdan's force was. With the 1st U.S. Sharpshooters centered in the woods, and the 3rd Maine slightly behind and to the right, they were in perfect position to surprise the rebels. The 3rd Maine, concealed behind trees and rock ledges, delivered a crippling volley that stopped the 11th Alabama in its tracks. They had help from 3 companies of the 1st U.S. Sharpshooters, who pivoted half right, advanced to the east edge of the timber, and blasted the 11th Alabama right with an enfilading fire. Reacting to the surprise volley, the 11th Alabama attempted to change front to meet the galling fire, but had little success. Fonz described the action, quote, "Heeding their instincts for survival, the men hightailed it to the rear in the cover of the line of the 8th Alabama, which had formed in a lane near the base of the slope at the edge of Spangler Woods. As the men of the 11th approached, those of the 8th dropped to a prone position to permit the fugitives to pass over them and reform." Unquote. During the fighting, the 6th New York Dismounted Cavalry unexpectedly disappeared, catching up with Devon's brigade as they headed off to Taneytown. The sudden departure of the cavalry carbine firepower was good fortune for the Confederates. It was time for Wilcox's men to exact some revenge. After their enfilading fire into the flank of the 11th Alabama, the sharpshooters rushed unwisely into the open field. It was then that the 10th Alabama hit them with a crashing volley from the left that drove them back into the woods and into the line of the 3rd Maine. Now it was the 8th Alabama's turn. As they advanced, they pivoted to front southwest and delivered a crippling blow to the 3rd Maine. The end was in sight for Berdan's force in Pitzer Woods. As the 10th Alabama hammered away on Berdan's left, and the 8th Alabama continued to engage the 3rd Maine, Berdan gave the order to fall back firing. Trepp confirmed in his report that the Pitzer Woods command was collected and formed on the Emmitsburg Road. The 3rd Maine, meanwhile, retired in relatively good order toward the Staub Farm, and once along the Emmitsburg Road they faced west and redressed their thinner ranks. Having driven Berdan's recon party from the woods, Wilcox's 10th and 8th Alabama retook their respective places on the right of Anderson's division line. The 10th remained at the northern end of Pitzer Woods and again advanced a line of skirmishers to the south. The 8th Alabama returned to the base of the slope at the southern edge of Spangler Woods and also sent out a line of skirmishers connecting Pitzer Woods on their right with Spangler Woods on their left. The 11th Alabama reorganized in the woods to the north of the 10th and soon took up a position to the right rear of Wilcox's left-wing regiments. It was from these relative positions that they would advance in support of Barksdale in a much bigger battle in the early evening on day 1. Reorganized after their skirmish, Trepp's 4 companies, D, E, F, and I, soon moved north and took up a position in support of the 6 other 1st U.S. Sharpshooter companies, who by this hour were all deployed in the fields west of the Emmitsburg Road. Trepp's force remained in a supporting position until mid-afternoon, withdrawing further to the rear once Sickles' controversial advance to the Peach Orchard and the Emmitsburg Road was well underway. The remaining companies of the 1st U.S. Sharpshooter Regiment fought in the forward fields until they and the rest of the 3rd Corps were driven back by Barksdale and Wilcox. Although the brisk firefight lasted only about 20 minutes, the engagement was highly significant. The Union soldiers withdrew with the knowledge that the woods on Seminary Ridge were teeming with Confederates. Sickles realized that the number of Confederates in those woods meant only one thing: an attack on his designated position on Cemetery Ridge from the west. Sickles sent a courier to Meade with the information, followed by another courier a half hour later. Another hour passed, and having received no response from Meade, Sickles decided to advance his corps to the Emmitsburg Road, the only high ground between the 2 ridges. This controversial decision separated his corps from the remainder of the Union Army, which was still back on Cemetery Ridge, and the ensuing course of the battle entirely changed. The site of this key engagement on the battlefield, with 3 monuments commemorating only the Union participants, is located just to the west of West Confederate Avenue, about a mile south of the Virginia Memorial. They are on Berdan Avenue, which is a cul-de-sac left turn off the main drive. These 3 monuments, and their correlation to the fight in Pitzer Woods, requires some further explanation. It's important to understand that the 1st U.S. Sharpshooter Regiment was comprised of companies from 5 states: New York, Vermont, New Hampshire, Michigan, and Wisconsin. The monuments on Berdan Avenue commemorate only the New York and Vermont companies. The first monument, to the New York Sharpshooters, commemorates the 4 companies A, B, D, and H of the 1st U.S. Sharpshooter Regiment from the state of New York that fought at Gettysburg. But only Company D was part of Berdan's force during the Pitzer Woods fight. That force also contained Companies E, F, and I from other states. The Vermont monument, the second of 3 in these woods, honors Company F. Company E from New Hampshire fought here, but has no monument in these woods. The monument to all the New Hampshire Sharpshooter companies at Gettysburg is located along the west side of Hancock Avenue, just to the northwest of the Pennsylvania Memorial. Company I from Michigan fought here, and also has no monument in Pitzer Woods. The monument to all the Michigan Sharpshooter companies is located on Little Round Top. Lastly, Company G was from Wisconsin, and while they are not part of Berdan's Pitzer Woods unit, they are mentioned here to complete the accounting for all 10 1st U.S. Sharpshooter companies. The monument to the Wisconsin Sharpshooters is located just south of the Rogers House on the west side of the Emmitsburg Road. The third and final monument to the Pitzer Woods Force honors the 3rd Maine. It is a positional marker, with the primary monument to the unit being on the north side of Birney Avenue at the southern edge of the peach orchard. Visit our website to register to use this app and explore anywhere, anytime on the battlefield. www.civilwaranimatedbattles.com